Welcome to the Beatles Talk Show, January 24th.
Yeah.
We're going to look at some Beatle trivia facts
Yes,
and
we
highlights of their career, such as on this date in 1958, the Quarrymen perform at the Cavern Club in Liverpool.
Quarrymen.
This would have been one of their earliest gigs at the Cavern Club, and you just happen to be wearing a Cavern Club shirt today.
I know, isn't that
It's good
something?
timing.
I've got like 3 dozen of them, so I
All
change
right.
every day into a new Cavern Club shirt. I actually got this in Liverpool, at the Cavern Club. Did you know that? Did you know? It's the truth. I'm not long at all.
All right.
But anyway, tell the folks who aren't real Beatle fanatics who the Quarrymen are or were.
Well, I'm hoping if you're watching this, you have an idea. The Quarrymen is an early name for the Beatles. And of course, this is early in the days. John and Paul and their buddies, George Harrison would join along, and they used this name for a while. In fact, on this date in 1959, they're still using this name.
And why the Quarrymen? Because of quarry?
Are you filling in?
Oh, the Quarry High School, right? The whole thing, yeah.
There you go.
There's
And
a
of
lot of
course,
names.
they were still teenagers at
They
this
were,
time.
yeah.
So on this date in 1959, they're still playing gigs. They're playing at the Woolton Village Club in Liverpool.
Right, that's right.
And they got to perform a 10-minute set for a Christmas party that was very late because it's already January 24th. And just to show you that they weren't really that busy of a band, really going anywhere, that
Yeah.
this would be their last gig for 7 months.
What did they do in between?
George Harrison went and played with a different band, the Les Stewart Quartet, after
Wow,
this gig
I
in
didn't know
1959. George was still young. He was only 16.
Hmm.
Of course, they all want to do music, but the reality is they're not really playing gigs. They're not really getting anywhere at this time in the late 50s. However, things were looking up much better for them a few years later. On this date in 1962, Brian Epstein becomes their
Wow.
manager when John, Paul, George, and Pete Best signed a management contract
right.
with Brian
That's
Epstein, where he would receive 25% of their earnings.
25%, folks.
The contract was signed and witnessed by Alistair Taylor.
And who is he? I can't remember.
He was part of their entourage
Was he?
early on.
Okay.
Yeah, so
And I still say to this day it was Brian Epstein that basically gave the Beatles their start. I mean, him and George Martin made the Beatles who they were early on. I don't think if it was for those two fellows that we would have the Beatles as we've known them. So hats off to them.
and working with Brian Epstein a year later into their contract on the 1-year anniversary of him being their manager on January 24th, 1963. They've already had a hit with Love Me Do. Please Please Me is their new single, and they have agreed to play an acoustic performance at Brian Epstein's record shop, Nems, in
Nems.
Liverpool, and that happens on this day in 1963.
Did they do that? Did they
Yeah.
actually play there?
Yeah,
Okay.
they performed Please Please Me, their new single, and even signed copies of the 45.
Can you imagine if we would have been living in Liverpool and actually been of age at that time?
Yeah.
I know some people. There's even a lady on my street where I live that grew up not far from where all this happened and probably was there at this show we're talking about.
Yeah, she could have been, yeah.
Because it was a big deal, but it wasn't that big of a deal still at that
Yeah,
time.
that's right.
So it's all perspective.
On this date, January 24th in 1965, it was a big shocking day across England and around the world as Winston Churchill died at the age of 90. John Lennon was even named after him, John Winston Lennon.
And he changed it to John Ono Lennon.
That's right, later on, yeah. On this date, January 24th in 1969, the Beatles were still in the recording studio working on the Get Back sessions for the new album and the movie. And this is the day they recorded their big jam of the song Dig It, which John was basically making up on the spot. They jammed a whole bunch of other songs. Billy Preston was there again. In fact, they were trying to convince Billy Preston to join the band, the official member of the band.
Yeah.
But Paul didn't like the idea, so he turned
Okay.
down the idea. They did record some of their cool new songs, including Two of Us.
That's a great
Paul
song.
started
I
working
love
on
that song.
Teddy Boy, which he would later release
Released on
on.
the McCartney album.
And they worked on Maggie May, Dig a Pony, I've Got a Feeling.
Another great song, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought Billy Preston really added a new dimension to the Beatles. Like I really enjoyed his playing a lot, you know.
I mean, it was handy just to have the extra player, right? Because otherwise, of course, for recording's sake, they don't need an extra member because you just overdub more tracks, right?
But you know,
if they were going to do live settings, though, yes, it made sense at this point to have a keyboard player.
But also, I think he acted as kind of a buffer because there was so much animosity going on at this time that having that fifth member, and he was such a nice fellow, that he was a buffer kind of soothing things over between. I don't think that album could have actually got recorded or those sessions would have been completed without Billy Preston there. I think they all would have walked away from it a lot earlier. So hats off to Billy.
That's
on
definitely
that one.
possible.
Yeah.
On this date, January 24th in 1970, Beatle fans finally heard the news that John and Yoko had indeed cut their long hair, and this was the beginning of year one for peace.
Doesn't seem like that big of a deal, does it?
Well, at the time, I guess it was shocking because, you know, the Beatles had always been known for having hair, and then, of course, with the late 60s, a lot of hair, and now the 70s have begun, and okay, no hair. So John's got his first short hair for the first time since being a teenager pretty well.
Yeah.
On this date in 1979, the double album, The Beatles' First Live Recordings, is released by Pickwick Records.
Those were Lingersoll, from 77.
And on this date in 1984, Yoko and her son Sean Lennon go to Liverpool to visit Beatles landmarks. And of course they brought the photographers and the cameras along to photograph them visiting Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields, where Yoko promised a gift of £250,000 to the children's home there in the area.
Well, that's nice. That was nice of her. Did you know that in 1981, John Lennon was planning on doing his first world tour since the Beatles to promote Double Fantasy and the yet unreleased Milk and Honey album. And he was planning on going back in 81 to visit the places we just mentioned and visit old friends that he hadn't seen since he left Liverpool. You know, sadly it didn't happen, but at least Yoko and Sean got a chance to do that, you know, which was nice. Yeah.
And speaking of John, on this date in 1986, January 24th, the album John Lennon Live in New York City is released by Capitol Records, featuring recordings from the one-to-one concerts held in August 1972, featuring some of Lennon's early 70s hits as well as some of his newest cover recordings for the Sometime in New York City album, and of course some covers he even did, Hound Dog as an example.
You know, I personally like that album, but it never got very good. When he first did the performances back in '72, he got very bad reviews from it. And I think because Sometime in New York City also did not do very well, he kind of quit the music industry there for a while. I mean, he did do Mind Games in '73, but he didn't do a lot. It seemed like the John Lennon that was the real activist and musician kind of stopped because of that. It wasn't received that well, which is unfortunate because I thought they were very good. But
that is true.
You know.
And finally, on this date, January 24th, 1988, George Harrison's new video premieres on MTV for the song When We Was Fab.
That's a great song.
Which was a cool video at that time, and would become George's last top 40 radio hit in the weeks to come.
Didn't it feature Ringo and Paul in there, or at least people?
Ringo for sure.
Because they had the left-handed bass player who had the walrus head, and that was supposed to be Paul. Yeah, I thought it was a cool video. If you've never seen it, go on YouTube and check it out. I like it. Yeah. So that's what's happened on this day, right?
That's a lot of cool things. That's January 24th. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
So my dear friends, come back when you can.